Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso recently stunned Africa and the wider world when President Ibrahim Traore unveiled a $15 billion military agreement with China. The announcement, equal to nearly half the country's GDP, has ignited fierce debate at home and abroad about whether the deal represents reckless bravado or a calculated gamble for survival. The figure alone was staggering. Reports suggest the package includes fighter jets, drones, tanks, artillery systems, and advanced surveillance technology, equipment far beyond what most African states could afford. For a landlocked nation with an annual defense budget that has never exceeded $500 million, the deal appeared almost impossible. Yet Traoré delivered the news without hesitation, presenting it not as an extravagance but as an act of necessity. Reaction was swift. Opposition politicians accused him of bankrupting the country before it could even recover from years of violence. Economists warned that the burden of repayment would weigh on generations to come. Analysts in Western capitals suggested that China was using the deal to pull Burkina Faso into its strategic orbit, trading weapons for influence in a region where France's power is already on the decline. Social media erupted with anger and disbelief. Ordinary citizens asked why billions were being spent on military hardware when hospitals run out of medicine, children die of malnutrition, and villages still lack clean water. Traoré, just 38 years old, brushed aside the outrage with a single line that has since defined the controversy. Without security, there is no state. Without a state, there is no economy. For him, the argument is existential. Burkina Faso is not just poor, it is bleeding. Jihadist groups, mercenaries, and foreign-backed militias have carved swaths of the country into lawless zones. Schools have been burned, markets abandoned, and roads taken over by armed men. Millions have fled their homes, and entire provinces function beyond the reach of the government. Development projects collapse before they even begin. In such an environment, Traoré insists, stability must come before progress. What makes the decision even more significant is its geopolitical meaning. For decades, France acted as the security guarantor of the Sahel, stationing troops, directing counterterrorism operations, and positioning itself as protector. Yet French credibility has been eroded by accusations of neo-colonial exploitation and by military campaigns that failed to bring lasting peace. By turning to Beijing, Traoré has effectively declared a divorce from Paris. China, unlike France, does not lecture about democracy or governance. Its approach is transactional: weapons, infrastructure, and investment in exchange for access and loyalty. Traoré has seized that opportunity, calculating that by binding China to Burkina Faso through such a massive deal, he forces Beijing to treat the country's survival as a matter of strategic importance. The shockwaves have been immediate. Across African capitals, leaders are watching closely. Some whisper that if Burkina Faso, among the continent's poorest nations, can assert independence through bold deals, then perhaps others can do the same. Western capitals, meanwhile, have expressed unease. Officials from Washington to Paris warn that such an agreement could destabilize the delicate balance of power in the Sahel, shifting influence away from the West and toward Beijing. In Beijing itself, officials have stayed silent, a silence many analysts interpret as confirmation that the deal is real. Within Burkina Faso, the announcement has divided opinion. In Ouagadougou's bustling markets, some hailed Traoré as a leader unafraid to defy the West and protect his people. In rural villages, many expressed fear that the gamble could saddle future generations with unbearable debt. University students posted essays online comparing him to Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader who once dreamed of African self-reliance. Farmers in the South, less concerned with geopolitics, said they only hoped that Chinese contracts tied to the deal would bring tractors, irrigation systems, and better roads. Analysts suggest that the arms deal may not be only about weapons. Several reports indicate that much of the payment will be structured not in cash, but through long-term resource contracts and infrastructure credits. In exchange for gold, manganese, and rare earth minerals, Beijing is expected to finance railways, factories, and agricultural projects. The $15 billion headline, some experts say, may be as much political theater as financial reality. If true, the deal could serve as both a shield against insurgency and a springboard for economic transformation. Still, risks abound. Western governments have already signaled that they may impose sanctions or cut aid. France, once the dominant power in the region, views the move as a direct challenge to its influence. The United States has warned of destabilization. European diplomats argue that Burkina Faso is walking into a debt trap that will leave it more vulnerable to foreign control. Traoré, however, appears unfazed. In response to criticism, he has pointed out that decades of Western involvement left the country poorer and less secure. If you cared about Burkina Faso's stability, he reportedly told one advisor, you would have built schools instead of sending soldiers. The gamble is as audacious as it is dangerous. If China delivers on promises of investment, Burkina Faso could gain not only weapons, but also infrastructure, jobs, and leverage. If the West moves to isolate the country, Traoré could pivot further toward Beijing, Moscow, or Ankara, deepening a new axis of partnerships across Africa. Either way, the boldness of the $15 billion figure has forced the world to take notice. Burkina Faso, once seen as a marginal player in global politics, has suddenly become the subject of intense debate in African radio stations, Western think tanks, and Chinese policy circles alike. For ordinary citizens, the issue remains personal. Some see in Traoré's gamble a path toward dignity and independence, a chance for their children to grow up in a country that defends itself rather than depending on outsiders. Others worry that the cost will be too great, that debt and militarization will suffocate hopes for healthcare, education, and development. The truth may lie somewhere in between. Whether the deal turns out to be reckless bravado or a masterstroke of strategy, one fact is undeniable. Burkina Faso has forced the world to pay attention. A small, impoverished, landlocked nation has disrupted the geopolitics of an entire region, proving that even in the modern era of great powers, the bold decisions of a single leader can alter the course of history.